Good evening and welcome to our ReggieCon panel discussing Habibti Pada in celebration of Arab American Heritage Month. This is our third ReggieCon panel for the spring semester, and the good news is it's not our last, so be on the lookout for future panels. My name is Jana Albrecht. I'm the Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management here at Illinois State University. Before we begin the panel, I just have a few details to keep us running smoothly throughout the panel and throughout this session. So first, we do record the session and it will be posted to the ReggieCon website, so you can go and view that later. Second, some of you may need confirmation that you actually attended tonight's event, and we'll post that link towards the end of the panel so you can complete that and get that to us. Third, most of you know this, but the presenter's video and the audio are on, but none of us can hear or see any of our guests. And so while that's a bummer, it's okay. We do have the Q&A function open, so we encourage you to ask questions of the presenters. It's one of their favorite parts. So please go ahead and ask those questions as soon as you have them, and just know that the panelists will get to answer your questions eventually. It may not be right away, but they will answer all of them. And so last update before we get started is really just a reminder, and that's to check our ReggieCon website early and often for our previous panels, and then also just to stay in touch with what's coming up in the future. So enough of the housekeeping. At this time, I am pleased to introduce our fearless leader, Dr. Scott Jordan. Dr. Jordan is the chair of psychology here at Illinois State, and he also happens to be our moderator and a panelist for tonight's discussion. So Scott, can you please take it away?
Thank you so much, Jenna. Welcome everyone out there to ReggieCon, the con that asks the question, what's your story? I'm Dr. Scott Jordan, aka Zombie Scotty, cognitive psychologist, philosopher here at Illinois State University. And tonight we're coming together to celebrate Arab American Heritage Month with a discussion of the fantastic graphic novel, Habibti Pada. Joining me in tonight's discussion is that motley crew of pop culture aficionados, purveyors of all things geekdom, the ReggieCon crew. First, the hardest working man in comics, Mr. Victor Dandridge Jr. Victor, please come on in, tell everybody a little something about who you are and what you do.
Of course. I am Victor Dandridge, lovingly called the hardest working man in comics, your resident comic creator on set here with my imprint Vantage and House Productions. I have had the extreme joy of sharing my philosophies on storytelling as a phenomenological narratologist, working directly with Scott, highlighting amazing projects through the ReggieCon crew, as well as an upcoming published piece on the series Invincible. So super excited to be here to talk about this amazing book. Oh my goodness, I can't wait.
Always fantastic to hang out with you, Victor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Also on the ReggieCon crew, the one, the only, the incomparable queen of all things geekdom, Dr. Vanessa Hintz. Vanessa, please come in and tell everybody who you are and a little something about what you do.
Yes, thank you. Good day, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. So happy that you're here to join us. My name is Dr. Vanessa Hintz. I am a clinical psychologist, a diversity, equity, and inclusion professional, a podcast host, and also new to the ReggieCon crew, and very excited to be here, very excited to be sharing in the space with you all and to have what I believe and hope will be such a wonderful conversation about this amazing story. So thank you. Welcome.
Fantastic. Always good to hang out with you, Vanessa. Also on the ReggieCon crew, my fellow WGLT psych geek, social psychologist, Dr. Eric Wesselmann. Dr. Eric, come in and tell everybody who you are. Tell them a little something about what you do.
Hello. Thank you for that introduction, Scott. Wonderful to be here. I'm a social psychologist at Illinois State University, a fan of all things nerdy, a fan of fandom, and I'm excited to discuss tonight's book as well.
Fantastic. Always good to hang out with you, my friend. Man, coming off that Jessica Jones Purple Man conversation we had last month, guys, expect nothing from but the best this evening.
That's right.
So before we introduce our special guest for the evening, we do have a little bit of administrative work to do. First, as always, we got to thank those people that make it possible for us to look as good as we do. Dr. Jana Albrecht, Miss Kelly Harmon, Mr. Sean Thornton, who does all the amazing artwork. I'm going to show you a whole bunch of it in a little bit. Miss Danny Schroeder and Miss Summer Simmons. We truly thank you for all you do for us. And Now it's time to let you know if you are anywhere in a 100-mile radius of Normal, Illinois, come to Normal this weekend for ReggieCon Live. We have like 16 hours of live programming at the Normal Theater. Here's who's going to be there. That's right. Fabio Moon is going to be in Normal, Illinois, signing copies of Day Tripper if you got them. By the way, Fabio was our very first ReggieCon panel. That was the night he Zoom bombed us. If you all remember that night, fanboy pretty badly. Mr. Alex Simmons, Inkpot Award-winning author, is going to be here as well. Justine Maston, author of Starship Therapies, is going to be here talking about a life of fan fiction. We got Levi Cosplay, award-winning cosplayers, coming in to run a 2-hour bit on cosplay for us. We got the Sister A and Sister K from Sister Speak Productions in the house. This is going to be amazing. And of course, the one, the only, the ReggieCon crew will be in the house making things happen. And then our ReggieCon student crew will be running mics for us, handing out swag, making everything awesome. Also, I got to let you know, ReggieCon does not stop Saturday night. Sunday, April 16th at Graham Cracker Comics, downtown Normal, 10 to 12. Fabio Moon's going to be in the house signing books, maybe chatting with you if you're nice. So that's this Sunday, 10 to 12. And then Sunday, April 16th, the one, the only Victor Dandridge Jr. will be at the Illinois Art Station. Victor, I didn't know the time. So can you tell the audience here what the time of that is going to be?
Basically, we're doing a pop-up workshop, so there isn't a set time. We're actually setting things up so that people can come in at their leisure and experience some of my You Create Comics material, that they can do hands-on little personal workshops for creating their own comics from start to finish and playing out all their creativity in the day.
That's fantastic. So, and all that, by the way, is free and open to the public. So all that geeky goodness is there waiting for all of you to come help us make happen.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my extreme pleasure to introduce tonight's special guests. We have the author and illustrator of Habibti Pada in the house, author Ameen Beydoun and illustrator Ismael Hernandez. Could both of you please come into the room? All right. And if we could start with Ameen. Please tell the audience a little something about who you are and what you do.
All right. Can everyone hear me okay?
Oh, very well. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Thanks so much for having me, Scott, and all of ReggieCon team. It's really such a pleasure to be here. I'm really so excited to be having this discussion, and just really excited for my first ReggieCon experience, hopefully not my last. So Habibti Pada is the book that we'll be discussing, I think, today is the first book in a series of books. There have only been 2 that have come out so far. It's a story about a young African girl who recently immigrates to the Middle East, where she faces off against a new culture, a new language, and new monsters that I've taken from Arab mythology. We follow along with Pada, who doesn't understand the people around her, and learn with her as she kind of hears new phrases and starts figuring out what's going on in this crazy world around her. There are 4 books, 2 books that I have come out, I've self-published, and Ismael is also the illustrator of the 2 books. And I'm excited to say that the second book recently has been nominated for Graphic Novel of the Year at the Indies Awards. So we'll be competing, yay! So we'll be competing against bigger people like Fantagraphics and Storm King Comics. So fingers crossed.
Where you belong, where you belong.
Yeah, I like that. I like
that. Put that up there with that
I
conversation.
Like
That's what I'm talking about.
Well, I got to say, well, very, very fond memory of meeting Ameen in Artist Alley. I think it was at the San Diego Special Edition, and saw the book. I said, dude, this is what I do. You got to come join us. He said, totally cool. I'll be there. So here we are. Ameen, so glad you can make it. Ismael, please tell the audience a little something about who you are and what you do.
Hi, well, I am Ismael. Do you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm calling from Spain. Here is 2 a.m. right now, so good night. I have been working with Ameen in this comic. Thank you very, very much for having us here and let us having this conversation with all you. When I received the invitation and I dig out about this ReggieCon, which I didn't know before, I found it really interesting how the event goes deep in some subjects that usually doesn't have the space to be talked or discussed. Some difficult questions that maybe arise, which is great for a conversation, for reflection. About me, well, I'm a comic artist. I have published as illustrator and writer several books. I started in Chile publishing. I love what I do. What else can I say? Well,
what I will say is that you just completely validated ReggieCon with your description of what you found when you went there, because that's exactly why it exists, to have these, I'm going to call them difficult, but you can also just call them nuanced and adult, right? Conversations about issues that people often just hide from. So we do have a thing we usually do at ReggieCon, and we're going to do that. At the same time, this is such a unique book in the sense the size, how the words are used. So I do want to have the two of you say a little something about, were you conscious of having it being so small, right? And the role that words were played? What are the conversations you had about that as you were creating this piece?
Well, that's Ameen's responsibility. He has the great idea. So please, Ameen.
Well, yes. Well, but Ismael is the one who makes the idea a reality. So let's. I don't want you to minimize that either. So I initially wrote Habibti Pada as a TV show for. I was actually applying for a gig with Sesame Street, and I used that. It was a writer's room thing, and they had a prompt, so I had to create a TV series essentially, or a pilot for a show, and that's where Habibti Pada essentially comes from. I wanted something that was educational and also touched on my experiences as a teacher in sub-Saharan Africa and Liberia and Comoros, and also was reflective of who I am, and I'm a Lebanese American person. So, I was thinking about it, brainstorming and stuff, and then I was like, it has to be engaging. That's the most important part for me. I would literally rather my readers be entertained and learn very little than learn a lot and be bored. That's where I come from, right. in the process. So anyway, it was written as a TV show pilot, and I knew that it wasn't going to get made, but I loved what was going on, and I wanted to put it out in the world. So I thought, and then I was like, you know what, graphic novel, comic book, that is something that is affordable. That is something that can be put out into the world within a year. And sure enough, within a year, it was out there. I was very intentional about the language, and it's a visual story, like you mentioned, Scott, right? It's very visual. And I give the reader, people speak Arabic at Pada, but Pada doesn't understand Arabic, and therefore no one gets subtitles, just like Pada. That's the point, right? But I can't have a book that's where people are just speaking Arabic at Pada. That's going to disengage the reader. So we had to find a way of telling a more visual story, and Ismael did that so beautifully with his visuals, with his watercolors.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the reason that there's just very little dialogue. There's very little dialogue in the whole series, because I like visual storytelling, basically. And I
That's
think that's
fantastic.
what the story calls for. And so,
I'll just say this and then we'll move on unless Ismael has something he wants to add. But I could feel that thought when I was reading it. I could feel the intentionality of the author and the illustrator. Ismael, is there something else you wanted to add to what Ameen said?
Yes, I do. When I received the script, I mean, always told me from the beginning that this was a pilot for an animation show or a series. And I have been working on storyboarding for animated film before, so it was very familiar for me. And the first thing I thought when I read the script was, how can I transform this into a graphic novel? Because in the original script, the words were an animated thing. they just they sounded, but Ameen wanted to the words move, have a life of their own, and being a character themselves. So we have to find a graphic solution for that. Those should be not only text, but characters themselves. So that's why all the onomatopoeias and all the dialogues, and especially the special word which has the center of attention in the current issue, had to have a specific way to be worked, not only how they sound or what they say, but also how they look and how you transmit visually to the reader what they mean, what they should feel, how that isolation of language must feel to someone who doesn't understand it. So we have live and feel from Pada's point of view what it means to be in that situation.
No, that's fantastic. I could phrases like living words are things I could talk about for hours. So on that note, here's what we do, guys. Each of us has picked our favorite page or frame from the story. So I'm going to share that with the audience, and then the person who picked it's going to say why they picked it, and then we'll all have a bit of a conversation about it. We've got 5 of those to go through, so about 7 minutes each. We'll work it out. And I believe the first image is Eric's, if I'm not mistaken. Is that yours, Eric?
Yep.
Okay. It's all yours.
Okay. So what we have here is an interaction between Pada and her father. And I resonated with this on many levels, both visually and personally. So we have here is, they're on the bus, and Pada is, Pada's defending why she has a hole in her jeans, because earlier in that interaction, she was playing soccer, and through some peer aggression, there's a hole that's torn in her jeans. Father's angry about this. And so we get this sort of argument between them. And then on page 2, we get this high angle shot on Pada, who's apologizing. And then this next moment where you've got, technically it's one moment, but it's 2 panels sort of bisected by the gutter there. And that gutter, at least the way I experience it, is representing almost like an emotional separation between the two. And you have this sort of visual matching. They're both they've argued, and now they're kind of stewing in it, and they both look very, very sad. So the father's lost his temper and is probably thinking, at least me as a father and how I resonate with this, goes, yeah, there have been times where I've lost my cool with my kids and I feel bad about it afterwards. All right.
Mhm.
And so you get this emotional separation, but also this sort of timing, right? It kind of stretches that moment out, once again, for me. And then we get this pull out to outside the bus, and the father then, having recognized he lost his cool, is explaining why he did, saying, Pada, your mom's working very, very hard. We've come to this new place. It's very, very stressful. And you're growing up. It's time for you to understand this. And so, although I've never experienced what Pada and her father have in terms of being an immigrant in a new place, I have been in times where lots of stress in life is going on. And, my kids do something, or in this case, the peers do something to the kid. It sets some tension, and we got to kind of ground ourselves again. And here the father is sort of communicating to Pada, I'm sorry, but this is the larger scope, and this is what it means to grow up. So that's my experience with this.
Yeah, who'd like to follow up on that?
That's wonderful. I love that.
So what I'm gonna say, go ahead.
Well,
Victor,
I'll
go
do
ahead.
it. I'll jump in. This page, ironically, is not the page that I chose, but is the most important series for me for the book, because, and I will definitely get into that a little bit more when we get to my page, but the conversation of not my fault, not my fault. There's a phrase, and I owe my mother $1 every time I say it. And it's know them, they, those. And the idea was, this is something that she gave me when I was 16, and I didn't do well in a class because the teacher didn't give me a test to redo. And that was when my mother hit me with this phrase, know them, they, those. And the context being, it's mine. Like, whatever it is that happens, it should always be me. I speak for myself, and don't put it on anybody else, because if you do so, you get into the habit of never taking responsibility one way or the other. And that was one of those moments to see that concept play out narratively was very empowering, because as a parent, I fully have said this to my children. It's not a matter of it being your fault. I need you to own what the situation is, because it being your fault, it's still your mother who's working hard to mend this. And fault is irrelevant when the occurrence is what this is. And I need you to understand it. That's a grown-up frame of mind of fault is a childish measure. It's not about fault, it's about occurrence. And here we are in this new place and space. We can't afford occurrences like this. And the under context of this, being very assumptive, as an American identifying Black man, I have this feeling that men who look like me, even fathers that look like me, aren't necessarily treated equally abroad. And that would include an African man that moves into a Middle Eastern space. So one of the things that he realizes that he did in this moment, I think this is part of what makes this whole context so brilliant, is he lost his cool, which means that he is not exhibiting what he wants other people to see about them. And when you really see it, when you really look at specifically the aspect to aspect moment, that split that Eric was talking about, they're mirroring each other. They're literally having the same thought of, what am I doing right now? How am I presenting who we need to be in this foreign space right now? Because there's going to be expectations. There's levels that people are going to be assuming about us. Am I falling victim to the stereotypes right now unintentionally? I think I am. And so they had to regroup, recollect, and him as the father has to say, and he's almost speaking of himself this way too, we have to be better than this. We have to, because they are going to look at us as outsiders, and they are going to have an experience towards us that we don't necessarily want. We have to do everything we can to keep that away. So that means not having an unkept appearance. That's mean not chastising you in public. And we both failed at that right now. So we got to bring this together. And I need you to be on board with what this is, because even I'm still working on it as a grown-up. And I thought that was such a great sequence, great storytelling across the board.
And if I could add to that, because I felt like what I saw is what was sort of a humanizing of the dad, and also pointing to what I saw on this page was intergenerational trauma in terms of him saying, we worked so hard to get out of this camp, and now we're here, and now there's all this pressure. And there are ways that I think people with intergenerational trauma and families deal with that are maybe not helpful. And I think the fact that he named it, we are stressed because we work so hard. And I feel like in this moment, I don't like the term corrective emotional experience, but that's what psychologists say. It was almost like something happened, and then we sort of had a resolution here. And I think he named in that moment, all of this contextual stuff is attributing to our stress right now because of the way we look, because of our context. And I think that for children who look a certain way or who are a certain way, we have to do that. We can't pretend like that's not part of it. And the fact that this father was so very quickly, not 10 years later, I'm sorry I yelled at you on the bus, very quickly said, I'm under a lot of stress, we're under a lot of stress, I think was so beautiful, and many parents can take note.
Well said. I do want to say I can hear the father's voice in these images. I can hear him yelling, and when he's yelling, he's completely in an angry space. And then in that frame that Eric mentioned with the two side by side, he's remorseful, and his voice is contradicting his words in that final space, because he sounds like the words are stern, but he knows his kid's suffering and he's suffering. So the pull away there with the bus isolates the two of them in a way that the other images haven't. And I hear that voice, and he's practically on the edge of crying when he's saying those things, even though he's being stern. And that's just incredible work. Very much appreciated. Do either of you two want to respond to what we said? Go ahead.
First of all, thank you, Eric, for picking this page. It means it means a lot to me, and I really think it's really beautiful what you guys brought to it and brought to the conversation. I really appreciate that. It's all exactly very much what we were going for. I also want to mention that this is also the first conversation that Pada has in the book, right? Like the whole book, everyone's speaking at her in Arabic, and she is lost mostly. She picks up on the word Yalla, but she's lost. And when I was writing the story, I had to have a scene at the end of the book that was like Pada talking to dad, and really it's really the dad, Pada, and the reader interacting to figure out what's going on in this crazy world, because I give so little. I really do. I give so little. Me and Ismael, we give so little to the reader. The reader has to really work hard, unfortunately, when they're reading my book. Like, is a lot of it, the way that I come at it is like, do not spoon feed the reader. Make the reader do the work. Sorry to all the readers that had to do a little extra work.
That's a good thing.
That's the thing of the piece. We're put in her psychological state. We're put in her phenomenology, and we don't get to stop. I mean, we could stop, but she doesn't. Right? She has to deal with being stuck. Yeah,
right. It's challenging. It's challenging to read because it's challenging for Pada, just like you said, Scott. And yes, I mean, in Lebanon, there's this huge racial dynamic that I'm not even touching on really in this book. That becomes a huge theme in later books. But it's just like Victor said, right? Is that when you're a minority, or when you're somebody who's not in a position of power, you always have to act like a superhero. Like you always have to be the best you can be, especially in public, because if you get angry, as an Arab man in the United States, this is the same thing. If you get angry, if you're anything less than perfect, it's you're not afforded the same what am I trying to say? You're not afforded the same level of consideration in some ways as you are if you are an under or a minority with much less power and much less privilege. So I was very much tapping right into that. as well. And also it serves, in terms of storytelling, it serves the function of hinting at EFO camp, which we're going to touch on in a few books. And it hints on Pada's mom, who is a domestic, she works, she's a domestic worker, which is a very big thing in the Middle East. So that's kind of why, that's how Pada and the family got to Lebanon, which we touch on more in book 2. But it serves to do that as well. And I think that what Ismael brought to it, I want to talk about this for a sec. I sent Ismael like stick figure drawings, basically. I like wrote I'm really bad at drawing. So I sent Ismael some stick figure drawings, and then what he came back with really blew my mind. He had this very cold blues and metal and dark scene. And I think that there were like very little changes that we ended up making to the scene because it was just so cold. And it was dark and it was sad, and I think that the artwork, what he did with the artwork, was absolutely perfect. So I'm going to let Ismael speak as well.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for reading so much between lines and between images. All the work that you did, just blow my mind. It's beautiful when you intentionally leave so many clues. You see how people take them up and read them. So thank you.
Well, we ain't the ReggieCon crew for nothing.
That's right. This is how we roll. We get into it. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
When I received this scene from Ameen, I thought that this one was a very important scene because, as Ameen said, it was the very first time that we have the space to really hear the character, really hear Pada and her father and their situation. So a lot of emotions are going on in this scene, something that Eric told very accurately, how, like in real life, when you have a difficult conversation, you have moments of encountering and separation and tension and anger and sadness. Of course, this is a vertical relationship, so it's a parent and her child, his child, sorry. So yes, there's this emotional drive of both of them and how they react to their situation. I remember a little story. My wife, who is a Chilean girl, once traveled to France, and there a French person asked her in a very informal conversation, well, and why do you think that you deserve to be in France? And my wife just freezed against the situation. I mean, all the minorities face that question. Who do you think you are to be here? Like, there is something to have to be proven, which is absolutely not. But it's a very big present question in all those relationships between the one who thinks that have some kind of right, which is written, I don't know, by some god or something, and the foreign who can be by nationality, by the color skin, by the gender, age, anything that is different from the majority, who has to be who has to prove himself or herself all the time because they have to prove that they are worthy of existing, which is something that really unnerves me as a person who I born in Madrid, in Spain. I live in Chile, and then I live in Spain again, sorry. And then I lived in Chile again and for periods of years, 7 years, etc. And I faced myself the situation. Maybe that's why I synchronize easily with the story of being the outsider. Well, please continue.
Well, it's all here in the work. It's all here.
Absolutely.
So we have a student question I'm not going to ask now, but I do want to let Amber Stojak know that we are going to get to that question. Okay, so Amber, appreciate you writing that question out. Anybody else out there, send in your questions and we'll get to them near the end. So we're going to move on here. Then we're going to go to, is this Vanessa's? I think this is Vanessa's. Can you see it?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Oh, I'm like having an experience. I'm happy I was on mute. I was like shouting back here, about to pass. Okay, this scene for me, I actually had to go back a couple times, and then I was focusing in on the eyes of this monster here because I interpreted these eyes as a clock. And so I interpreted this monster as sort of like time, like a representation of time. And I started to think about, to me, this is what happens in my house every single day between me and my husband. I'm always the one like, we gotta go. And he's just la, la, la. And I think that it is, I had a moment here, just given the context and the space that I'm in my life, where I feel like I'm always moving from one thing to the next. Like my life is governed by my calendar. I feel like this clock time monster bird thing is always right behind me. And I feel that pressure. And I think that this really spoke to me because no matter how much Pada is, we gotta go. This other person, this other child here is living their best life. Like, no, I'm cool. And it got me to thinking too about in America and in most Western cultures, we are very future oriented. So we don't typically, we're always, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do I got to do tomorrow? What do I got to do next week? What's on my calendar? And unlike a lot of other cultures in the world, we don't stop to celebrate the present moment or even, I think, give honor or accurate readings of the past. But I think we're very sort of future focused. And again, I don't think that we necessarily understand what that does for our sort of experiencing in our day to day. And so this really, I went back and I was studying this and I was staring at this, and I don't think the universe makes mistakes. I think I read this at a time in my life where I needed to hear and receive this message, which I want to be, no shade, not like Pada in this moment. I want to be like a child that's sitting down. Like, yes, there is this time pressure that is hovering over me. And you know what? I'm going to stand firm and do what is best for me in this moment. And so this was beautiful. Even the hand up, like, no, thank you, was everything. And so I loved everything about this.
Fantastic. Who would like to respond to Vanessa?
So I'll jump in because this was traumatic for me. Like the energy of this one, it's giving Secret of Nim. I don't know if you've ever seen that, the animated feature, but that one, it's highly traumatic. Kids, tears, like that's what this is. The context of these two individuals who cannot receive the words, I think are so very interesting because Pada can't understand the language and this other child can't hear. And so there is this lack of information or input that is at play. But I think the other part that really becomes contextual, and I love the fact that we're kind of talking about the book backwards, is Pada's reaction to the bell going off is the representation of the ideal of what her father was talking about. When the bell went off, she's like, we got to hop to it. We got to get back in school. Let's go. And here was a person that seemingly, because she understood, couldn't hear it, was going to possibly at risk of being in trouble because they weren't moving when the bell rang. Like, Pada has this essence of, no, we have to. And because they're not moving, that's what the actual drama is Pada is trying to live up to an expectation, project said expectation on another child who has a deficiency, and therefore is trying to overcompensate towards that child. And without recognizing that this child has their own flow, like this is not their first day, it's your first day. And how they're reacting is probably customary to their experience. Maybe they are, in fact, waiting for someone to come get them of an authoritative position. And you're interrupting that right now. You are projecting your essence, your need for excellence, and your ideal of what that looks like on this kid. And that's a very interesting sense of conflict, especially when you have this beautiful orientation of this outward monster, but when you realize the actual trouble might be Pada because of how she's perceiving what the situation is. And again, as you've already established, this is a fish out of water story. She doesn't understand everything that's happening. So her take on something could very well be not necessarily wrong, but just not right. And that becomes even more dynamic when you look at that play on how this works. It's really, really beautiful that way. High marks, Vanessa. Good choice.
Ameen?
Sure. Wow, that was really, really beautifully put. And I love what you brought. I'm so happy you picked this page, Vanessa. And I'm really happy what you brought. You brought a lot of yourself to the page too, which is exactly what ultimately, as an artist, that's what you want. You want people to find their own meaning in the page. And that really, really resonated with me. I really love that you took it. It's all absolutely valid, right? Is that Pada is scared. There's this thing that's happening, it's a time pressure, and this kid is just not, he's doing his own thing, whether or not he can hear it, whether or not it's his own flow. That's exactly what's happening here.
Love it.
So I'm really happy you picked that. And what Ismael did with the lettering is really beautiful too, right? Is that Pada is speaking at him and it's just it's totally illegible, right? So I really like the visual storytelling that I think Ismael, that was I didn't even put that in the script or the storyboard, but he just had this beautiful way of showing that this kid doesn't understand Pada, whether it's not because he can't hear or he literally can't understand English as well. I do want to touch on this monster for a quick second. So this monster is called Ainka, which I took from Arab mythology. And in Arab mythology, Ainka is said to be the most beautiful and most terrifying of all of God's creation. And I don't know if you guys have, I'm sure you guys, we've all had that administrator in school who just, put the fear of God into all of the kids. Just you look at that person and you need to get out of there. So that's kind of the visual, that's kind of where the monster comes from. Also, the monster kind of wears an administrator outfit. So I wanted, and sometimes it feels like this administrator is literally going to eat you, which this administrator does, right? So a good way to understand, I find a good way to understand all comic books is actually look at the villain sometimes, right? The villain will tell you a lot, oftentimes tells you a lot more than about the story than even the main character does, and the villain here is absolute, comes out of nowhere, right? It comes out of nowhere. It's not, Pada does not try to engage with it. Pada does not try to understand this monster. This monster, you just survive. You just need to survive. And that's the point. That's where in book one, Pada just needs to survive. She's not trying, she's trying to understand, but really she's just trying to keep her head above water. And Ismael did a beautiful job of putting the suspense into the scene, you know what I mean? And making it really scary. And Yeah, and I'm really happy that you mentioned Secret of Nim, Victor, because another kind of philosophy of mine as an artist is, especially a writer of kids' books, is I like to scare kids. I think that kids can handle a lot more than we give them credit for. Yeah, there you go. So I think I remember being afraid of certain media as a kid, and I don't want to shy away from that. So I'm happy that it scared you, and I hope that it scared some kids. But you know, it's going to be okay in the end. So I'm going to leave it to Ismael if he has anything else to add.
Yes, I do. When I received this script, I remember thinking, okay, this has to be scary. And I had some experience drawing and writing some comic books with mythology involved. I have two comics called Miguel of Fuentesanta, which is a person who very much like Hellboy, kind of encounter all this creature in Chilean mythological culture heritage, which is actually very interesting, very rich. And how do you do a really scary eating child monster in a book that can be read by children, not only by children, but by children too. And I am a father myself, I'm parent myself, and of a 8-year-old child, and that was a very interesting question. How can I draw and storytell in this if I would give this comic to my son? How he can read it? And like Ameen, I think that children can take a lot, but it's all how it's been told. How is explained, how is presented, what are the words that you select very carefully so you can give the message that your son or the child needs to hear, needs to learn, without traumatizing, but at the very same time, without giving them too ingenious or wrong ideas of how the world works and what they need to learn in order to be able to survive in this world, which sometimes can be very beautiful, but sometimes also can be very frightening. So this monster, which is very interesting to work with, we have this conversation with Ameen about how graphically we put it in this scene, in the work, how it would represent the values and the emotions that it needs to represent, because like most myths, it's a symbol. It's a symbol of something, some aspects, some learning that we must know. That is the storytelling, the tradition, the oral tradition is about working with symbols, just with words, with images. So this monster had those symbols, which was time and the administration outfit, the presence, the frightening presence, because, and this is something that is in all the book, Ameen's intention was to give with very little, a lot to think about. And the work for me as an illustrator was kind of a mute movie. How can I visually tell a lot of things that is going on in the story? And for that, I had to use every little dirty tool that I could take my hands off, because I had to work in body language and face expressions, in how the color is used for the mood of the scene, for the emotions, how do you use the visual space, like the two previous selected pages in which the Pada and her father's is divided. And that's how you said, that's a visual representation of their emotional state and their relationship. And like that, there is a lot of small or bigger choices that talk about it.
It's fantastic.
Well done.
I think we're going to go on to our next image. I think this is Victor's.
Oh.
And we have this and then one more image to do. So go ahead, Victor.
All right. So mine comes with a caveat and a statement of bias. I needed to get to Eric's pages to understand, because I didn't read any of the outside covers before starting to read this book. So I did not know that Pada was a girl. And that was the moment that I had to go back, and it recontextualizes this entire sequence for me. Because on one hand, when I first read it, I was like, okay, this is an empowerment moment, which is great. But it hits even harder when you go back just a couple of pages before and you realize that the identity crisis that Pada was going through, recognizing that she didn't look like the girls that were at her school. She didn't have painted nails. She's not wearing a skirt. She is in a very boyish attire, and therefore she feels even more ostracized from the crowd. But here comes this thing where even though she doesn't feel like one of the girls, it's the boys that are playing soccer that she's like, but wait, that's my space. That's my lane. This is my talent. And so for this page, this is one of the most important self-actualization pages I think I've read in comics in a long time, because when you really get to that point from Eric's pages, and then you have to go back, because if you don't, then you've done yourself and the story a disservice. You go back and you realize Pada is now making a move to show that she can hang with not just the boys, but in this culture. She actually feels like she belongs in this moment. And to see the juxtaposition on either side of the story where she questions herself, first when she doesn't understand the actual audio language, and then getting to the point where I don't think I'll ever fit in. Here was the moment where she actually was here and was okay with being here. And there was something so powerful with that, that you get this context of pure energy, excellence. She's a champion in this moment, and this is her greatest self. She found a thing that is kind of the thing that all of us strive for. We want to find that thing that will allow us to, be excellent amongst others that we might feel insecure. And that was amazing to see that in this book. So that's why I chose that one, because it was the key place of my own bias being addressed. I looked at the short hair, the tie, the pants, and I was like, oh, it's a little boy. Pada is an interesting name for a little boy, but okay, maybe I just don't understand the culture that Pada comes from. And so when you get to that space, you go, oh, it's a girl. Wait, let's go back. And then you see a totally different context, and you see, oh, look at the compassion of finding someone who might be a little different, who might also be ostracized, and she trying to relate to them, looking at the girls and being like, I'm not jumping rope, like that's not my thing. I don't have the pretty nails. I'm not even wearing a skirt. This could be a hand-me-down for all I know, because her parents, as they've tried to come up, maybe a skirt is harder to get because in some cultures being, there is a girl tax. So, they got what they could get for her uniform. They just went with it. But here in this space, in this time, Pada's like, oh, but let me get that ball. Let me show you what I can do. And everyone saw it. Everybody, for good and bad. They saw she's capable, and we have to respect her in some way, shape, or form because she's capable and was willing to show us.
What What I love about what you just said, Victor, is dropping a little knowledge here on developmental psychology. Imitative creatures by default. So infants will do what you do if they can, right? So we resonate to each other with our behaviors and our facial movements. And then when kids get to be about 18 months, they start resonating with objects, right? So in other words, they're not doing the same body movements, but they're putting the same hat on, they're dancing around the same table. And then by 3 or 4 years, when language comes in, they don't imitate with objects anymore. Now they're doing cognitive imitation with words. So it does build up like that developmentally, right? And here you have someone who's been put in this space where the words just don't work. So I'm going to do what works. And once you get that object out there, they can all resonate to, then she can step into it and do all the things that you mentioned, right? So there's a real nice bit of developmental psych here in that I'll use my body when I need to.
That's right.
And even when I'm using words, I'm still using my body. We just don't talk about it that way. So I loved it.
That was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Ameen or Ismael? Eric, did you have something you wanted to say? Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you looked like you had something to say. Ameen?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for picking that page as well, Victor. And I think that this is I get a lot. The biggest question I get by far is, I thought Pada was a boy. What's going on? which I love, right? I think that everything that you brought is exactly what my intention was. And frankly, I think that if I could do it, I wanted Pada very much to appear male presenting, masculine presenting. And then for it to be a surprise that, oh, actually she is, actually it's a little girl. It's not a little boy. This is also really interesting in terms of the two cultures that I'm working with, because in Middle Eastern culture, gender is very, very well defined. Gender is strong, and gender dictates so much of what you do. Whereas in a place like Liberia, where I where I lived, or Comoros even, which is also a Muslim country, interestingly enough, as children are allowed to be children in some ways. And there aren't those strong, those gender differences definitely come about as adults, but I didn't see it as strongly in children, which I thought was fascinating as well. So Pada is allowed to do whatever she wants, was allowed to do whatever she wants back home, but not anymore, you know what I mean? Not in this context. So I was definitely touching on that. I think that if I could do it again, I would want the jump rope scene to be clearer. I think that what my intention was to have everyone be like, oh, like Pada is a girl. But I think that this is the first comic book that I've ever done. And I saw it, like Ismael said, I come at it from a filmmaking background.
Sure.
So I'm seeing the movie in my head and it's clear, but comic books are not movies, which Ismael has taught me so well. There's lettering, there's panel sizes, there's all of this new form that I don't know how to work with. So I think that this panel shows a little bit. I would have liked that jump rope scene to have been clearer, so that this one hits even stronger. But there's opportunities for growth, opportunities for improvement, which is very exciting.
Listen, as my job as a fellow comic creator, what I have to say is, no, you actually don't want it to be clear. And the reason why I say that is, if it were clear, I wouldn't have gone back to re-examine what it was that you had there. And to Ismael's credit, one of the things that makes comics so much different than movies is the opportunity for self-discovery in the actual context versus dictation of context. In film, you're going to show me what you need to show me. And again, clarity, it makes sense for you that to be your focus. But in comics, we actually can build our own clarity structure, and the context of the panel designs, the size of the gutters, all of those relationships give us the opportunity to make our own analysis. And that's where comics get to be its own format and have its own strengths versus film, which is why I'm loving that Ismael gave you that. Like, no, I'm going to show you how you can do this in this form because it is different. And I think that honestly, what you're speaking to is your strength as a filmmaker, storyteller, who has now added this to your repertoire, and it's different. It's just different. I think it's a totally different language, much like Pada is going through in her experience. Like, oh, this is a different language to communicate with. Oh, I like it. It's context. I love
That's
it.
cool. That's cool.
Yes,
Thanks for bringing that. I never thought of that.
Of course.
So here's a scoop from a producer's perspective. We have 4 questions in the queue,
Oh, snap. Okay.
and we have 1 image left. So we're going to do the last image, and then I'm going to ask Ismael to respond first, and then we'll go from there. So this is my image, and I mean, I truly appreciate you complimenting Vanessa on bringing her life to your work, because when I saw this image, my daughter and I sort of lived this, not as a minority moving into a different culture, but 2 people moving into a different culture where my daughter didn't understand the language. So when my daughter was 7, I got to take her to Germany with me for 6 months. I was working at a lab there, and I put her in a German school. And they didn't speak English. And I sat with her in the class for the first 20 minutes the first day, and she seemed to be okay. And so I walked out in the hall, and after about 5 minutes, she ran out into the hall crying. And she said, "Dad, they're laughing at me." And I swear to God, these 2 young German girls that come out of the class, they wrap elbows with her, and they say to me, "Wir lachen doch nicht," which means we weren't laughing. And they walked her back into the room. And not only is that a beautiful moment for her, but I think I cursed her that night when I told her, "Those 2 little girls, that's who you have to be now." Right. You have to point those things out to your kid. And of course, my kid's now a social worker. So I think the curse worked. But
good job. Good job.
Everything in this image is that moment. And just the loneliness and the fear of looking out at a place of faces you don't know. And then seeing the look on his face is just stunning. So like I said, I saw this frame, and yeah.
That's a good one.
I don't want to say I've been there, but parts of it we've done. So I love the frame. So what I said I'd do is ask Ismael if he wanted to respond to anything first, and then we'll go from there.
Yes, I think that maybe in some way we all have been there. I mean, we all have been entering into this group that nobody knows us. We don't know anybody. That moment in which you feel like naked, being observed, like if everybody would see every little detail that you can think of, which is kind of real, but also it's not. Why I say that? Because yes, it's true. When you enter into a new group, everybody looks at you, and everybody somehow study you, making this mental image conclusion of what you are in just a glance. But at the same time, what you feel that is exposed, which is your inner self, is not really exposed. I mean, maybe there are some special persons who can read beyond your external images, but majority of people won't know if you are really that nervous or scared, or if you are feeling right. And those are more subtle things that when you are in that situation, that you think that it's like they are yelling, "I am scared." But in reality, you are not. In reality, when you talk about that later with the people, you usually have that sentence in which they say, "Oh, I didn't notice. Oh, I didn't know. No, you look just fine."
Yeah.
And when I read the script, I thought that it was very important to feel the gaze, to feel the feeling of being absolutely observed by all those new people who are somehow in the position to judge you, which is not a yes. So it was really a really interesting moment to present her situation of being the new one in the class, but beyond that, in the culture, in the situation with these new people.
I love it. Ameen, did you want to respond?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for picking this image. Also, this is like, just to give you some context, literally the first page of the book, you don't see, you see like a bell ringing, you see like a bus coming, you see kids talking. In close up, you see some feet, a pair of feet in sandals, which is unusual, and then reveal. Like, this is what's happening, right? So this page is extremely important because it's the first time we get a look at Pada's face. And it's a reveal that it serves the 2-page spread serves two functions. It shows us that, it shows us what all the classroom looks like, and it shows us that Pada looks different than everyone in the classroom, which are two very important things. And Ismael showed so beautifully. But yeah, it's a lot of people, people who, I guess by a show of hands, I guess in our panelists, has anyone had to start a first day of school, but like in a new school where you didn't know anyone? Because I was, it's terrifying. It's terrifying. And that's just, that's what I wanted. That's kind of the purpose of book one in many ways, is also that, this person is a refugee, this person looks different than everyone, but also this person is a child. It's their first day of school, and that is scary. And I want everyone to be able to connect to that.
I'm going to tell you what, my daughter, this didn't hit me when I was reading this. My daughter's biracial and does look different.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wasn't calling out on that, Scott.
All the German kids in the class. She's 24 now, so it just goes by. But yeah, that's her right there.
Yeah,
staring out at that class. Okay, so look, we have 4 questions from the audience. So I'm going to read the name and read the question. And the first one is from Eva Reyes. It says, "What's the name of the books?" That question came at the very beginning, so please feel free to repeat the answer.
Thanks for asking. The series is called Habibti Pada. Habibti means my darling in Arabic, and Pada is actually is taken from a student that I had. I was a teacher in West Africa for a long time, and Pada was actually one of my students. And that's kind of part of the way that I developed the story. But they're graphic novels. There are 2 books in the series out right now. And they're available on my website, which I will try to find a way to share. Maybe I'll type it into the text box.
Yeah, please do.
But also I wanted to mention that, Eric, I didn't realize that you got a copy of book 2. I remember, I'm happy you got it.
Just sit down, Eric, pull it back. Eric, just sit back, put it against your chest.
There we go. Yeah, that's perfect.
I sent it a week ago. I'm like, who's buying my book? And it's nice to meet you, Eric. Nice to meet you. So that's the first question.
Very cool. So some of these questions are going to come from students who are in a class that I'm teaching. Victor's in that class as a comics consult. And what we're trying to do is use comics as a way to teach the concept of othering. So obviously we have social othering, and that's the way that the concept is most often used in these kind of conversations. We like to use comics because in a comic page, the frames other each other. They earn their meaning against each other, with each other. The words all mean in relation to the space. So we're trying to get them to see the world as an othering system from the top to the bottom. And we won't go too much more philosophically deep at the moment. So here's my student's question. Her name is Amber Stojak. Do we other children innately? If that's not a mic drop question.
That's a great question.
So she's got more here. Let me put it here. Do we other children innately? For example, we feel this huge margin between them and us because they are immature and we see them as not understanding accountability or fault. Bam, that's on the table to all of you. Do we other children innately? All right, I'm gonna drop a little. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
no, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Me?
Go ahead, Vanessa.
Vanessa,
Ladies
yes,
first,
please.
always.
Yeah, one thing I was gonna say, and it's something that I used to talk to the parents I worked with about, is I think one way that we do this is by referring to children as like little adults or little humans or little whatever. And I think that we cannot, I don't think that we appreciate childhood and children for what they are as they exist. And we are seeing them in relation to, again, in this point, adults or maturity or whatever. And so I do think that even from like a psychological perspective, again, we are just ushering children to adulthood as opposed to, you know, like what I talked about with the time pressure, right? Why when we think of children as little adults, we're not allowing them to be as they are in that moment. And so I do think that we, particularly in westernized cultures, because we're always like, keep going, and then you get too old and then you also don't have value. But that's a different conversation. But I do think, thank you, Amber, because I do think that that happens again and is maybe not intentional, but is a reflection of this sort of societal, you have value when you have the agency, when you have all the productivity, all of these things. What I think we don't see is that children do have that, just in a different way. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Ameen.
That was so beautifully put, and it kind of blew my mind also. I think it's totally true. You know, calling them little adults and just like trying to make them, let's get them to adulthood already, so that they can stop being so silly or so stupid or whatever it is. No, exactly. Like, this is a beautiful moment in your life. You know what I mean? It's a moment where everything is so full of wonder and everything is so new and fresh and scary, right? And that's the point of this book, is that things are fantastic. Sometimes so much so that there are monsters around and there's magic around.
Great.
And you don't want to lose that. You know what I mean? I try to, even though I'm trying to pay the rent, you know, I'm paying my bills, I try not to lose that. I always try to remember that sense of wonder and sense of magic. And I want, and it's something that I treasure very much in myself, is that I feel like I still have the child within me in some level. And yeah, it's a beautiful moment in and of itself. It's not like, you know, undeveloped or lesser developed. It's a moment that should be cherished and loved. And I think that the Lebanese people, to their credit, do a very good job of that, much better job of it than in the United States. Lebanese people love children. They'll like stop you in the street, and they just like generally allow children to be children. They're very good about it. So thank you for making that comment, Vanessa. I never really, and thank you for that question, Amber, because I never really thought about it. It was very, very thought-provoking.
Very much so.
You know,
go ahead.
I just want to drop a little neuroscience in here, because we're talking about the adults. Well, we tend not to talk about what's going on in the kid. Right. So, you know, as I said earlier, we kind of resonate to each other naturally. That's how the brain's built. So if you guys see me doing like this, what it means to see me do that is to be put into planning to do that yourself. That's why we go to rock concerts and do this together while we jump up and down, or by birds fly together. Right. But what happens is, so the Papa Bird will sing a song to Baby Bird. And Baby Bird will learn the song because as a father sings, it's putting the baby in the planning state to do its chirping. Coolest finding in the last 20 years is that after the baby's brain has learned a bit of the song, it starts to inhibit the father's influence. In other words, the baby no longer automatically does what the father's doing. Now, why? Because this baby's got to learn to sing its own song. It's got to learn to flap its own wings, because if a bunch of birds just flap wings together, they're not going to get anywhere. They have to become an individual, which means part of what it means to become an individual is to learn to keep people out of influencing you. We don't talk about it that way enough. We have other ideas of how we're going to do it, but I think this idea, there's a lot going on. There's a growth and a separation coming from what the child is that scares a lot of parents, I think. And instead of teaching them to, as you said, embrace it and enjoy it and let the difference come to fruition. So just thought I'd say that up there.
I think one of the things that we've talked about in class are different concepts of othering. And this one is almost a brand new one, where it's a hierarchical concept of othering, where naturally, yes, we other because you're a child, I'm not a child. But through a hierarchy, we have an estimation of what your input understanding is as a child, and somehow automatically assume that as an older person, ours is higher. But we see that what's really interesting is that as cultures progress, as technologies progress, the older cultures have a harder time adapting to those opportunities, and children are the first ones that can integrate new technology into their stuff. It wasn't us that made TikTok popular at my age. It was my sons, who are teenagers and younger, that made it popular. And through way of, how do I do the TikTok thing? That is that concept where, yes, I might think that there's a level of understanding that they don't have because they haven't earned as many years, under the sun as I have. But then there is still a hierarchical position that they can earn themselves that I can't attain, and almost need them to teach me. And so there's this balance of the othering where it keeps it from being necessarily negative all the time. There can be a hierarchical, but you have to understand that sometimes, based on what the context is, that hierarchy flips upside down. And even with all your age, you are at the immature level because you don't know how to do this, and they do. So there's that understanding of that balance, which then again goes right back into contingent othering. Because these things exist at the same time, though separate, they are necessary for everything to cohab.
There you go. So look, we got 2 more questions. I know that they're going to spark conversation. So
there we go.
Here's the next one. Anonymous attendee writes, in the scene where Pada plays soccer with the boys, her way of showing them that she is not conforming to the gender norms made up within their own self-sustaining systems. Let me read that one more time, because self-sustaining systems is a concept we talk about in the class. And it's the idea that every single cell, the work that is the cell, creates the cell's boundary with the world. So our boundaries are necessary for us to have systems. It's, again, a way we're not used to talking about this. But then we get to talk about identity as managing identity boundaries. And so let me read that question again. In the scene where Pada plays soccer with the boys, her way of showing them that she is not conforming to the gender norms made up within their own self-sustaining systems. So I guess what they're saying, what's being asked is she confronting their self-sustaining work in a way to achieve her own identity?
I honestly think she's confronting hers. She looked at the girls and was like, oh, woe is me, I'm not doing them. But then immediately goes, I don't need to do them. I play that. Like, I
got this.
Yeah, that's more my speed than jump rope. I'd rather get out there. I think in the question at hand, the biggest question to that concept is whether or not the boy that hit her in the back, did he know she's a girl? That's one of the bigger questions that I've had is, did he know that she's a girl? And if so, what is the context of gender that he is exhibiting in that regard? Did he go harder towards her because she's a girl, or did he go that hard because he didn't realize she was?
So, I mean, you look like you were going to say something there.
Actually, I don't want to say anything. That's kind
there you
go. That's something that I actually want to totally leave to the reader. You know what I mean? I think that as an artist, I have certain responsibilities, but I also don't want to overstep those responsibilities. So I'm gonna leave that. I'm gonna leave that out there. Great question, though.
I would say that the act of violence that the young boy engages in indicates that his system has been perturbated. His system has been disturbed in order to, and he acts out because his identity can't be what it is if this is happening in his space. And I think this is a very valuable way to talk to people about hate from others. It usually isn't about you. It's about how they have to believe the world is so they can believe themselves to be a good person. And you are a perturbation to their identity. And, you know, raising kids, you just think, well, you have to manage that relationship and it's up to you how you do it.
Well, there's no doubt that this kid who's like the soccer star of his class is getting one-upped by this stranger. And he's not having any of that. So definitely that's happening.
Violence is a pretty good indicator. Please go ahead, Ismael.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that I have been watching in my son how games are everything. It's how the world is constructed, how your relation with all the others, how you are accepted or not, and how all the others look at you or not. Games is something so big in the stage of life of childhood. So when she took her place playing, in this case soccer, which is something that usually is not played by women for gender thing, etc. She's validating herself in her context through a game, which is something so naturally showed, because it's so important in this stage. That's the space where everything is going on, and that is the space where all the others are going to see her and are going to recognize her being the way she is. So well, that
No, brother Ishmael, if I may say that, if I add to what you just said, Shakespeare made it clear we're playing games with words every day. You just look at any conversation and look at the passive aggression being passed around with words, identities being sustained, people being perturbated during department meetings and losing their cool because they aren't the ones that got to make the good point. When I started looking at adult behavior like a soccer game, things became pretty clear pretty quickly. And yeah, then you just got to find a good coach. So we got one more question, and then we'll probably have to sign off for now. So Sandra Metz asks, what was your biggest fear when releasing this book? Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. My biggest fear was that no one would read it, of course, right? No one would buy it, no one would read it. It's still a fear that I have, you know what I mean? I'm still in the middle of making this stuff. I definitely feel, you know, a lot more validation, which is great because, you know, when I first made this book, it was the first thing that I was really, my first piece of art, my first piece of work that I was putting out into the world. So that was a huge fear. The biggest challenge, yeah, that's definitely the biggest fear. Still to this day, the big fear is that no one will end up reading this book, especially not kids. So I've been trying, you know, I don't have kids myself, which is interesting as a children's book writer. It creates added challenges in some ways because I don't have access to school systems. I don't have as many access to children's libraries, etc. So that's definitely been the scariest part of the process for me, and something that still scares me and still that I'm working on and it'll probably never stop scaring me. So that's kind of a beautiful thing. Hopefully
Yeah.
it like inspires me to keep going. You know what I mean? I use the fear.
Yes.
Absolutely right. And I hope we've waylaid some of those fears with our deep appreciation of your book this evening. A quick shout out to Amber, who wrote a note to me in the chat. Amber, that second question, you said you wanted us to discuss it later. So we're going to save it for later. What we're going to do now is say thank you to our guests and ask them if they've got anything they want to tell us about what's coming up for them.
All right, I'm gonna thank you so much for having this conversation. Was so rich and really affirming for me. Also, this is why I do what I do, is so that I can have conversations about it with people like you, and not, conversations with people who really take it seriously and really analyze it and really try to understand it. It's such a rich conversation. I want to say thank you so much to everyone who participated today and for bringing so much thought, from the Q&A to the panelists to Ismael being here, everything. It was really, really beautiful. Thank you so much. Habibti Pada book 2 is out. I think I dropped it. I tried to drop it in the chat.
It's there. Yeah.
All right, cool. You can get your copy there. And then book 3 is on the way. And I'm currently also working on my first novel, so keep your eye out there. I'll also throw my Instagram and my email on the chat so that anyone can reach out to me at any time. You know what I mean? Nice. If you want to reach out about questions, about your career questions, anything, please reach out, and we'll have a conversation. Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for coming, and I'm glad we met, right? Ismael, is there anything you'd like to say about what's coming up for you?
Well, as Ameen, I wanted to say thank you, a big thank you. When something that you create is analyzed and analyzed in this way, in such a deep way, is something very enlightening for you as a creator, because, as Ameen said, you put a lot of information in your work, but also you leave some information to the reader. You can't control everything. I think that trying to control every aspect or of any creation is a mistake. You have to be a god of some kind to control everything. You can't control everything. You just have to control somehow the most important aspects of your work. It is very important to leave the space to whatever the other person reads, because a lot of times there come interpretations as maybe you didn't come up with. And that's very enriching. You can learn from that a lot, which is very interesting. Thank you very, very much to all of you, to all the people who came today to listen and to participate in this conversation. As Ameen said, Habibti Pada 2 is already out. I myself just published a Kickstarter project which is called The Wolf and The Wolf and the Crow. And I am working right now in a very super special secret project, so I can't tell anymore. Sorry. But as soon as I can, I will tell as much people as I can. So thank you very much. I'm going to post as well my Instagram, which is very simple, Ismael Hernandez Art, so very easily to find. You're very welcome to to be alert of whatever new works are going on.
Well, thank you so much for that. It's a little after 8:30, so unfortunately we have to bring this amazing conversation to a close. ReggieCon crew, Victor, Vanessa, Eric, love you guys. Thanks for coming as always. Ameen and Ismael, Lord have mercy. What a fantastic time. So glad you came. I do have to share a little bit of news with everybody here just to remind us of what's coming up. Our next ReggieCon will be a celebration of Asian American Pacific Islander Month on Wednesday, May 3rd at 7 p.m. with a discussion once again of Hayao Miyazaki, this time The Wind Rises, which is clearly his most adult film, maybe potentially his most controversial. So I cannot wait to have that conversation. And then just a reminder, everybody, this weekend, come down to Normal, Illinois, Friday and Saturday, hours and hours and hours of stuff just like this, plus a bunch of movies. Well, no, actually it's repeating. So there it is, from all of us to all of you. Let me stop sharing here so I can do my outbit. Lord have mercy, Scott. Thank you very much. So from all of us to all of you, big hugs. And remember, never edit yourself out of your own story. Bye-bye.